first up, we have the executive producer and showrunner, Mr. John Wirth. And the star of the show, Mr. Colin Bohannon, ANSON MOUNT. So, as I mentioned, introducing it, that season finale last year had a lot of finality to it. When you sat down and started writing this season, John, how did you and the writers get back into the story and get everyone back to the hell on wheels, basically?
When it became clear that Lily Bell's identical twin would not appear in Hell on Wheels, we went in a different direction. When I came on the show, it's sort of a difficult position to jump into something that's 2 years running, and so it's a chance to make a fresh start, and it's also an honor to work on something that's as good as this show has been for 2 years, and to be working with this gentleman here. So we just, the main thing that I wanted to do, what I told everybody is, this year Colin will drink less and talk more. And that's sort of been our marching orders. And I think it's played out. What you saw here, if I could just take a moment, it might have been a little disorienting for what you saw, but this is actually the second episode of the season. We could not bring the first episode because it has a lot of VFX in it, and it's not hasn't been completed yet. So we didn't want to show you something that, where you're looking at pictures you may not understand because there's stuff that's just not there. But in that episode, we discovered that after the finale in season 2, Durant has gone to prison. Colin Bohannon survives the winter in the burned out Hell on Wheels. If you saw the final episode, the Indians attacked and burned that place to the ground. And he gets control of the railroad. And then he returns to Omaha, where everybody has gone for the winter. He collects the group, and they come out to Hell on Wheels. And in this episode, the second episode, we introduced Louise Ellison, who's a newspaper reporter for the New York Tribune. She's played by Jennifer Farren. And she comes out to sort of tell the story of the railroad, which at that time was sort of like, I see a few people who might have been alive in the 60s. It was sort of like in the 1860s, similar to the moon launch in the 1960s. It was very big news. People were writing about it in the newspapers, and everybody was reading about it and talking about it. So at the end of that premiere episode, Durant gets out of prison and comes to get his railroad back. So this season is a little bit about Durant versus Colin Bohannon in terms of who's going to control the railroad. And then you barely had a chance to breathe after the powerful ending of that episode there, when you saw sort of a sizzle reel for what's coming up in season 3. So I hope you enjoyed that.
Anson, you've really seen Colin evolve over the course from the pilot to what we saw just here. What's that evolution been like for you to play?
The only thing that because I've never had a show go multiple seasons, so the only thing that I knew was to be careful about the kind of footprint you put down at the beginning of the show, because there are things that you don't know about the character yet, and there are things the writers don't know about the character yet. So you need to be able to leave space for that to grow, and I think I did that all right. And now we're getting into I don't like static characters in television. That's what the reason that Breaking Bad is my favorite show ever is because there's a lot of growth, character-wise. And character is the spine of story. And now I'm having to figure out how to mature or break the character apart. And so that's an interesting process that we go through. hand in hand in communication. So that's the best I can answer that question. But it's an interesting process when you go from theater and film to suddenly you have a 10-hour arc once a year. It's big.
He's got probably the most responsibility he's ever had in these episodes. Has that been something fun to play?
Absolutely. Because Cullen, if he has one talent, it's at being a leader of men. Not to say he's always successful at that, but he found a part of himself, or he found, not a part of himself, but he found a talent in the war. And that he's been able to it's funny that I just love the idea that he came into this world for one reason and stayed for another. He came into this world to implant himself and find these people, and then he discovered that his talent for leading men is equally as applicable here as it is somewhere else. And so then it becomes, it's his way of dealing with PTSD. It's another war. He cannot stop fighting. But he learned, I think, through the end of season 2 that it's not a perfect metaphor. Building a railroad is not necessarily fighting a war or the way to build a railroad. And so it's forced him to rethink. If he wants to continue with this addiction, this new filler in his life, which is the railroad, it's forced him to rethink how he's going to go about doing that and to continue his addiction.
How much research goes into this on both your parts?
He does the research, and I just write it down. Actually, we do quite a bit of research. We have, there's a lot of information about the building of the Transcontinental Railroad, and I knew virtually nothing about it, to my discredit, when I came aboard this show. And there's a wonderful book by Stephen Ambrose called Nothing Like It in the World. There's a book called Empire Express. There's a lot of books about the railroad. And it was a fascinating enterprise. So one of the things that I wanted to do that I felt was an aspect of the show that could be improved upon was sort of telling the story of the railroad, planting it in time. This is 1867. The race was on between the Central Pacific, which was building west to east, and the Union Pacific, which was building east to west. And I wanted to see, this is really kind of a Western about work. And I wanted to bring that aspect into the show where we really see the work. This year, Cullen Bohannon is the head of the railroad. He's kind of like a guy who's worked himself up to the president's office, starting on the factory floor. He knows how to do all the jobs. He's done those jobs, and he's not a guy who's going to sit in the office and give people interviews. He's going to get out there and do the work. So we have a chance to see the work of the railroad, which has been fascinating, and we researched those details pretty closely to kind of tell the story of what that was and what it was like for those guys. You saw that big double-decker train car, where people were sleeping. Those were actually designed by a guy named Jack Casement, who is some of Cullen's characters based on this guy, and that's a fascinating set. It actually exists. You can climb around in there. It's really fun. I don't know. For little boys, it's kind of fun. So for me, when I'm being a little boy, I try to get into that Casement car once in a while.
What's been something you've been surprised by, either in your research or in writing or reading the scripts for this show? Something you've learned?
About the history?
Yeah, about the history, sure.
I was surprised to learn that that the railroad was owned by the people who built it. I sort of thought it was a government enterprise, The government funded it, but Dr. Ant owned Union Pacific, and the big four guys owned Central Pacific, and they were separate railroads until 1977 when they merged into one entity, I think. So that surprised me.
Constantly learning little things, Like the other day we were trying to figure out how old General Grant was. There's he's 45. Well, younger than we thought. And you learn about how the different, what's going to be interesting, what we're going to be getting into soon, hopefully, is how the Union Pacific was run very differently from how the Central Pacific was run, and the reasons behind why one would seem to be winning over the other at any particular time.
Anson, you filmed this up in Alberta, Canada, kind of, I assume out in the middle of nowhere from how it looks. What does that add to the show and your performances?
Oh, man, I love working in Alberta, first of all, because it's gorgeous, as you can see. And the crew that is the local crew in Calgary understands the Western better than just about any crew I've ever worked with understands any other genre. And you find out how important that is to have hair and makeup people who know how to behave around a horse. Electricians that know how to handle cattle. I mean, it's really. I mean, because you could get hurt. You could get seriously hurt. And just our armor has one of the largest antique gun collections in North America. It's a real pleasure to work up there. The crew is they're a dynamite crew, aren't they? They give 110% every single day. And we have 40,000 acres of usable set. You can't build that. And I get to be outside every day. And most every day I'm on my horse. And it's great.
We're going to let you guys ask some questions in a moment, so be thinking of some good ones, or else I'm just going to ask John all my questions I have about Love Monkey, which ones you've probably never heard of. You've really had your relationship, or rather Colin's relationship with Elon has really evolved over the years. What has that been like to play as two people who didn't even know each other, and now they're sort of, they're very good friends, I'd say.
Common and I, and the creators, were on the same page at the beginning of this, that we did not want to service the typical white guy and the black guy are going to be friends now, and everybody's going to be happy, and because it just wasn't realistic and it wasn't interesting. We were constantly making Silver Street jokes on the set, but because we did that now, we've gotten through a lot of stuff in the 2 seasons. Now that sort of what became an animosity, that became a begrudging partnership, has now, in the 3rd season, we're starting to get the payoff of what all of that gave us. And we're getting into real trust, real interest in each other's well-being, and ways in which we start to get each other's back that are, I think, incredibly interesting. We shot a scene on the day before yesterday that is just, can't tell you what it is, but you know what I'm talking about. I think that relationship has become the backbone of the show.
And John, working in the character of Durant, he's always been sort of this, I've always found him a lovable rapscallion. I don't know if lovable is the right word, but I've enjoyed watching him sort of scheme into things. So what's that like to write for you and the writers?
I've heard that Cole Meany, if he doesn't like you or gets mad at you for some reason, he headbutts you. So I'm trying to stay on his good side because I don't want to get headbutted. Durant's an interesting character. What we've tried to do with him this year, if you've ever seen any of Cole's movies that he's made, any of his European films, he's, especially the gangster movies, I think 1 or 2 of them that Mark Strong have been in, he's a very dangerous fellow. And I was really interested in seeing him be a little more dangerous than he's been in the first 2 seasons. And I think we've got a storyline coming this year that we're going to see that. And it's pretty good. And no headbutts yet. So.
You guys are on Saturday nights this year. With what's that been like? It's not a night that's programmed a lot, or are you excited to sort of be in that new frontier, as it were?
AMC tells me it's a good thing. So, I was actually watching AMC before I came over here today. It is Saturday is their Western day, so it's 14 hours of Westerns leading into Hell on Wheels. So I think the people that enjoy our show might be already watching AMC when we come on. But I anticipate that our ratings will hold and probably grow, and I think it'll be a good thing. A new frontier.
Cool. Does anyone out in the audience have questions? Down here in front. The question is about if Cullen will have vulnerable moments this season.
Yeah, I tend to be an actor who I'm not as interested in a character's strengths as I am in their weaknesses, and I think the best tough guys you can see their frailty, you know. So yeah, I'm all about that. I think it's boring to look at a brick wall for an hour. So yeah, there will be a lot of that. But then it has to be balanced with what's being held in his blind spot to a certain degree. Where it starts to get interesting is where the blind spot starts to fill up with so much stuff, you're not blind to it anymore. So it's not. I don't look for opportunities to be vulnerable, but they are there.
Next question. Thought I saw another hand. Oh, right there.
This script you couldn't show a whole lot about the Native American aspect. Can you fill us in on what might be happening along those lines in the future?
A couple things about what you saw. It's a producer's cut, work in progress. We're still working on it. It hasn't been color timed. There's been no sound. This is all temporary music. And I knew that was the question that was going to make those guys leave. We're down 2 people. Anyway, the Native Americans were really a big part of the problem of constructing the railroad for the United Pacific, particularly in Nebraska, where we are in this season. So they will be playing a part for sure as we go.
Episodes 3 and 4.
Yeah. To be specific.
I want to know what's up with the Swede. Where's the
Yeah, the Swede.
We saw him up there, right?
The Swede, I really can't give away what's going to happen with him except to say that he survived the fall off the bridge as only he could, and he's grown some hair, and he's got a very interesting journey this season, which will bring him into an ultimate confrontation with this gentleman, I think, at some point.
There in the blue. Blue dress.
When creating a show that is historical, based in history, but for a modern day audience, as a writer, do you feel that you need to adapt some things, that you sort of let the actual historical facts go a little, say, like, well, that's not exactly how they would present the situation or have behaved just that way, but we don't want to tell that whole story. We only have a certain amount of time per episode. Let's make it a little bit easier. Or do you find you really want to show that moment to the audience, or does it just change per scene, per episode?
I think in our show there's sort of an historical underbelly to the show, and we try to remain true to the events that happen. And when there are historical characters in the show, we try to keep them as close to honest as we possibly can. Our fictional characters are another story. I mean, we can create whatever we want for them to do. So we sort of straddle the line on it. I'll tell you one thing that we spend a lot of time talking about is we try to stay in our 19th century heads, especially with regard to Cullen and Elam's relationship. it's very easy. I'm sort of I'm in Texas, but I'm sort of a liberal guy. I guess it's okay to be a liberal guy here in Austin, of all places in Texas, but that's the way I sort of lean naturally. So I'll come into the writer's room and say, let's do that show about gun control because it's out of control in the United States. And people look at me, Mark Richard, my partner there, he'll say, brother, they ain't got no gun control in 1867. Guns a man, best friend in 1867. Okay, so that's a challenge because obviously none of us were here. I was almost here in 1867, but so it's something we pay a lot of attention to.
Was this incident in this episode, was that based on anything you found in your research or anything like that?
The Mormons were a big part of the building of the railroad. Once the two sides got to Utah, and they played a very big role in what was happening. So we're starting to get into the territory where they were homesteading. So this is not a true story, but I thought it would be interesting if in surveying the railroad, they came across this homestead in the middle of nowhere and found these people, and then you saw what happened.
So do you have like a map of how far the railroad is along on the Lincoln direction? Interesting. Other questions from the audience? Right here.
Can you talk about some of the coming off of the showrunner and already established? Can you talk about some of the differences, some of the challenges that you went through, and then also looking at some of the differences
Everybody hear that? Okay, the question is about some of the differences from the new showrunner coming on, both from his perspective and Anson's.
I think that the biggest thing was creating trust between us. And we started doing that, right from the beginning, before I even really started working. He was in New York, I was in Los Angeles, and we just started talking on the phone. And he was very gracious, as I would say, I've got this idea for, he didn't shoot it down or didn't tell me that they already tried and dismissed it, and, or that it was just no good. Once in a while, he'd follow up with an email and say, I'm going to cut you some slack because you're new. And I was like, oh, well, okay. But as I said earlier, I think that the Gatons created a wonderful tableau here. My kids actually introduced me to the show initially, and they loved it. And so when I first sat down to watch it, when I was asked, watch it for real, when I was asked to come into the situation, I sat down with my wife, who's sometimes a barometer of what I should do and shouldn't do in my career. I said, just watch this for me and just tell me what you think. So we sit down, put on a DVD. He comes on, and I hear my wife next to me go, oh. Oh my. And there's a very funny birthday party story, which I won't bore you with, but anyway, so it's the challenge for me was to come in and honor all of the fantastic work that had been done prior to my arrival, and get to where I could feel comfortable enough to take credit for some of it, which I've done, and then introduce sort of a new direction, a new way to do things, and primarily just to really concentrate on the Cullen character. And as I said, I wanted to hear more from him and really open him up, which I think we're really doing this year.
Yeah, I think that John, what was great about, what's really, really great about having John on board is just somebody who is smart enough and gracious enough to come on board and start with opening lines of communication between all of the artists and executives involved, and to have me come into the room and just talk about where I think Cullen is, and to hear what they're thinking and hear what I'm thinking. It just makes all kinds of fucking sense, you know. That, you know, compared to, not to slag off on anybody in specific, because at a certain point in a enterprise that's this large, when things happen or breakdowns happen, it's no one person's fault. It's just the nature of the beast. So last year in the first season, I would be in the car and the driver would say to me, "Hey, how about that next episode? Great script, huh?" And I'd be like, "I haven't gotten that script, but thank you for letting me know." You know, like seriously, the fucking drivers were more ahead of me in the story than I was. And there tends to be this go-to, the actors can't know it, the actors can't know it, we have to keep the actors, you know. A certain amount of that, as Mark and Lenny told you earlier, is, you know, there's a certain amount I don't need to know, but I don't think it's healthy to keep your artists in the dark when they feel they need knowledge in order to plant seeds or take concerted steps in a direction. So that's been great, and just the you know, I'm also not a fan of the sort of go-to everything's positive, everything's wonderful Hollywood attitude. But that's different than actually having people who are confident and positive in the ways that can be celebrated on a day-to-day, week-to-week basis. And John is consistently a positive leader and thankful for people's input. And that goes a long way, even, you know, when it comes to the crew. John's been very good about making people feel like their contribution is important, and it's true. Yeah, that's about all I can. You know, the only other thing I will say is that you start to learn that there are two kinds of people who work in this business. Those whose egos are attached to what they do for a living, and those whose egos are not attached to what they do for a living. And the latter kind tend to be the ones who have the most fun, and those are the ones that I want to work with, and he's one of those. So.
We have time for 2 or 3 more, so if anybody out there has another one, they're again.
This is a frivolous question, but why the change from the cigar to the
Episode 301. You will see. August 3rd, 8 p.m. 9 Central.
Yes.
It seems to me that Hellman's has received a modest level of input by the ANSON shows. And I'm just wondering if the plan is maybe for the next season there might be more promotional opportunities, perhaps the social media a factor to
AMC has promised me that they're going to spare no expense in promoting the show this season. I don't know. Anson's very active on his Twitter account. I have never been, you know, singled out by a horse before, but his horse has its own Twitter account and made a you know, comment about me one day, and I was like, I barely know that horse. But he tweets, and I tweet. It's a fairly new thing for me. My kids love it. You're on Twitter? Oh my God! But I've been trying to do it, and so I think we'll try to, you know, get out in front of it a little bit more this year. Hopefully Saturday nights helps us. You know, I don't know if there's a lot of 50-year-old men who are watching the show going, "Honey, did you get that tweet from Anson?" No.
No, I know what you're saying, and to be brutally honest, we have felt that. But it's hard I feel blessed to work with a company like AMC because you're not dealing with a gigantic, you know, monolithic CBS corporation. You know the people on a first name basis who are making the show and who are doing everything, and I like that. But you take the good with the bad. Like you've also, it's a network who's they're having to manage, these dual rocket ships of Mad Men and Breaking Bad, and that's going to get the attention, and that takes a lot of work. So, look, I'm not gonna be negative about being the. I'm okay with being the redheaded stepchild for a while. It's okay. We get to benefit from being on the same network as Mad Men and Breaking Bad. But that's also changing, and like when you build an audience over a course of years, I think, and you build a viewership, you build a loyal viewership, and you actually win people over. We went from being, all of our reviews were well, it's not Deadwood. It's not going to survive. It's not Deadwood.
I think I wrote that. I don't.
No, you said we're not Deadwood, but that's okay.
All right.
But then you get to a point where they go, okay, this is because you build a body of work. So in different things factor into that. As soon as our first season went up on Netflix, I mean, you felt the difference. So you just hang on tight. You do your best work, and you assume that good work will be appreciated. And I'm pretty proud of the work so far.
Time for one more. Anybody out there has a burning question? That's not a love monkey. There.
Do you enjoy watching the series with an audience, and are you ever surprised by scenes that capture the audience kind of more so than you ever thought they would?
Yeah. It's so rare that I get to watch episodes with an audience like this, so it's really nice. I didn't have the benefit of knowing what you were going to see because I hadn't seen the whole episode, so that was different. It's a very different experience because I wasn't really involved with the editing at all. When I have a film and I know that film so intimately, my palms are much more sweaty and I'm jittery in my seat, and then it's a much different experience. Like we premiered my movie Cook County in South by here in I think 07, 08, and that was just I thought I was gonna crawl out of my skin. I didn't know what was gonna happen. But yeah, it's wonderful. It's a wonderful experience. I think the whole point of film and television is to watch it together. I think storytelling is at its best is a communal experience. We will always. That's why movie theaters will never go out of business. We will always feel a need to gather together in a dark place and hear a story told. And sometimes TV, it's kind of a false community. I think sometimes. So this is a real treat.
Thank you so much for coming out. Thank you to our panelists. Hell on Wheels is back August 3rd.